Hey folks, so hopping on to do a reading. We're going to use some cards because I had a question yesterday in regards to another or a different image that I mentioned in another video where my guides gave me this image of a really dark line and a light line, the dark line representing all of the underbelly of what's going on, all of the secrets, all of the beliefs that reinforce the matrix that we live within, um, all of the warlike mentality that has gone on for decades and decades on this planet. And I just wanted to know, now that they are intersecting, and with that original image, my guides told me that, once they intersect, that darker line would then begin to lose its power and ultimately cease to exist, however long that may take. So, my question is, or was last night as I was shuffling, and I'll put that video on the screen somewhere. Now that we are at that point of intersection, that contrast is peaking, and things seem to be exposed for all of us to see, so long as we are paying attention. Is there anything else that we are waiting on in terms of it being exposed or just coming to light, I guess? And I am working from the Death Doula Oracle deck. And I don't know who this is by. So it says the Death Doula Oracle has been influenced by the teachings of a wide variety of spiritual sentiments, mental health practices, the art of astrology, alchemy, and mysticism. But I'm not seeing an author's name on here. But regardless, I picked it up yesterday, and of course there are many ways to think about death, right? And this deck kind of just leapt off of the shelf at me, so I decided to pick it up. But death of practices, habits, beliefs, patterns that do not serve us any longer, that we cannot take into the future with us. Death of cycles, right? If we think about the seasons, there's a death, and then there's a birth into the new cycle. And then, of course, there is the physical death as well. And I mean, if you know anything about a death doula, they help people transition. And so there's a transition within these cards, transformation within these cards, and moving on to new other aspects of life. So the cards that I pulled: Solitude card, the Positioning card, the Odyssey card, and, because I'm running out of hands here, the Balance card. Alrighty, so let's get into it. Now, make sure they're in the right order. Okay, the Solitude. I feel like this card is talking about how we were how we were asleep, at least collectively, not all of us, but for eons, we were asleep. We were under the spell, we were under their control, we were not paying attention in ways that we should have been paying attention, right? We were going along with the program. And we've got generations of people who, yeah, they fought and attempted to crack open some of the things that were influencing the control that they had over us as a society. And I want to broaden that and say worldwide, right? This warlike mentality has permeated the entire globe for a long time. We've been sort of disconnected even from higher dimensions. So I mentioned in one of my recent videos about the fourth dimension and how there are beings that hang out there that are not so great, that have been conducive to the um, separation of us, right? To the control of us, to very bad and terrible things happening to groups of people on this planet. And although they cannot manifest things themselves, they influence those who are susceptible to their influence down on this 3D plane so that they can act out their desires. So I feel like this card is encompassing all of that and probably a whole lot more. How we've been, like I said, cut off from those higher dimensions, and how now that is a part of what is opening up to us in a more profound way. Even when you think about psychic development and how it used to be about 20 years ago. I've heard the stories, I've lived the stories where everything was sort of done in isolation, where we didn't know who we could trust to ask questions. We didn't even have that. We didn't have people in our orbit to even discuss these things with, because it's easier to control a people if they do not know how powerful they are, if they are not tapped into their intuition. Religion, right, has done this as well, and we see a deconstructing of religion happening collectively, but that's a big one for lots of people, and it is hard for them to let it go. So this card of solitude, it gives me vibes of the Hanged Man in the tarot, where we're kind of suspended. We're not paying attention, we're not asking questions, and we're even taking comfort in aspects. When we're talking about the matrix, we've taken comfort in aspects of that matrix. We have acquiesced to aspects of it, most of it, right? Go to work, pay the bills, come home. These people, there's a hierarchy that has to be maintained. And yes, we rail and fight against it when it comes to groups, people of color, when it comes to the indigenous. But we haven't quite gotten to the point where collectively, right, that has changed on a larger scale. So this card, I feel, is extremely powerful for setting up this story, for telling the story. Then we've got the positioning card. Now, this is the one that's talking specifically about all of the beliefs and the value systems that are in play, and how they have, look at that vertebrae even. It's like, well, that's the structure that holds up our body, right? So we can be upright. It is the backbone of the entire nation. So going back to my question of, do more things still need to be revealed now that we are at that intersection? And are we at the intersection? Yes, I feel like we are at the intersection. And the power is waning, because we wouldn't be able to see so many things if that was not true, right? So this positioning is about all that has held up the entire country and beyond, right? and how it is coming into question, how we are questioning it from every angle imaginable, how we see right through the bullshit at this point, and how so much is being exposed of the crime syndicates, their relationship with Netin, Yahoo. Um, I'm trying to be careful and what's going on the strip over there, right? So their relationship, the U.S.'s relationship with that country, and how entangled it is. And so this is a card of exposure. So this is a card of exposure, but also realization. Realization that the matrix doesn't work. Realization that we've been lied to for decades, even about certain events that have gone on that have been orchestrated, and how we are no longer falling for it, although they thought we would. They thought we would because they were upholding what they believe as well, right? They were upholding what they believed as well. So they believed that they were untouchable. They believed that pedophilia was okay. They believed that they could grift and grift and grift until the end of time, and no one would be paying attention because we hadn't been before. We were in sleep mode, right? But when the backbone of something so intricately woven as the matrix that we are within right now, and as that adheres to the even larger forces at play beyond that, such as that fourth dimension, and what happens there on that plane of existence. It gets ugly, it gets messy, but those beings, those malevolent beings that have been infiltrating and influencing this matrix that we exist in, they're losing power as well. They're in fact withdrawing their power because they see it's no longer working. Because what is happening is this, the Odyssey. Now, this is a card about adventure, but it's also a card about chance. And when I think about chance, I think about luck, and I think about how theirs is running out, right? And how in the midst of that, we are collectively taking back our power because of the divine feminine energy that is at play, because of the opening up wider to access the higher dimensions, because of us even moving through the fourth dimension into the fifth dimension. So this feels also like a card that is talking about, as our access opens up again to those higher dimensions, and we begin to remember, right, who we really are, what we're really connected to, what we really came here to do, how we are all spiritual beings, how powerful, right, how intuitive we are. That's overriding the positioning that they are attempting to keep intact. They can keep trying to darn the holes, right, of the matrix, of what they are really doing They can keep trying to bury things. But it's like playing whack-a-mole, or it's like just a leak that is busting through the floor or the walls. You can put tape over this hole, but then it's coming out, you know, the water seeping in through another hole, right? So this card, I feel, is representing that white line that I was talking about earlier, intersecting with the dark line, just to simplify things, right? The line that represents good versus bad, although, you know, it's not ever that black and white. But this is saying like, huh, well, you're taking your power back in so many ways, individually, as a group, in community, as an entire nation, as an entire population living on the globe right now, right? And it's also saying that because of that, there's this belief like the earth has been sort of cut off from the rest of the universe, you know, like it was put in timeout because the things that have been running rampant up until this point, because it is a planet that was overrun by those very dark forces, right? Those dark actors. And so you've been put in timeout, but this card is saying, oh, well, your time has been served. You know, if you want to think about it like that. And so the time has been served for the planet to be exiled. The time has been served for spells, right? Spells of superiority that have been held in place for so long over different groups of people. Those spells are breaking, right? So this is a card of like, they can keep trying, but the power that they had is no more. So my question was everything exposed? Has everything been exposed already? Are we still waiting for other things? I would say these cards are saying, yes, everything has been exposed. You're really not waiting on anything else now. There may and will most likely be things in the background that we don't see, details that take long, you know, a long time to surface. But we're seeing a lot of it already. And look at this card. It's almost like there's chaos in this card. There's like rough terrain in this card. There's a person in this card. It almost looks like water on top of the person, although there is actually stone. So I would say there's lots of illusions that are coming into view as well. That, like I was saying, like, you know, we see through those illusions, but they're just bubbling up to the surface. And it's reminding me with this, as I was looking at it a second ago, like this person reaching up from the grave or being down for the count, right? Like, nope, I still got a little bit of fight in me. I still got some fight in me. But it could go both ways, right? That idea. So don't think that it's over, because they're going to keep fighting tooth and nail until they can't anymore, right? And then we've got the balance card. And we know what balance is about. It's on the micro scale, right? It's just, if you got a table, for example, you need four legs, otherwise it's imbalanced. It's out of balance. But on the macro, it's like, okay, we've had that, all of those centuries of the structure that once was. It was in place. It was the backbone of our existence. It lended itself to the hierarchy that we abided by. Not all of us, not without question, but you hear what I'm saying on that larger scale, worldwide, right? But we've got this energy at play now. So think about a planet that in the future, hey, if we were under this rule for centuries, well, perhaps we're now facing a time when we are under something far more pleasant, far more agreeable to humanity and to the earth, and hopefully for centuries, right? This is not a period of time where we, there's no going back to what it was. There's no going back to what it was. But there's also some of the smaller things that are bubbling up to the surface. Like, it's taken us an age to realize how compromised our political system is. That's one of the details that needs to continue to bubble up and to flesh itself out in front of our eyes. There is no party that is I want to say better than the other, although my brain has a hard time accepting that. Because, well, we see what the red hats are doing, and we like to think that the blue hats are a more safer, agreeable option. But we cannot deny all of the shit that they have contributed to as well, that has been keeping a lot of this going. I said months and months ago, if they haven't figured out what to do by now in terms of this regime, then it's because they don't want to. It's because they are also complicit. It is because they are in cahoots with a lot of the leaders doing the egregious things that they do. And it's because they are benefiting from it. And they do not want to let their funding and their grifting go. But they want to also come out and play in our faces, the way people say, and feign victimhood, right? And put on the show that they are attempting to do what they can. Now, I won't say all of them are that way. Some of them, it feels genuine, Some of our more local representatives, right? And even you've got Crockett and you've got AOC, and they feel all right. They seem all right. But don't tell me an entire year has passed by and you couldn't figure out something better than what's happening right now. So that's a part of the things along that darker line as well. and some of the waking up that many of us have been doing within this last year. I knew it wasn't perfect. Lots of things I could see. And some of the things I just wasn't ready to believe. And I'm like, Israel, really? And then I was like, oh yeah, Israel, really? Damn. You know? So, the balance. It's rocky, it's shaky, it's shifty. Look at all those rocks. The most rigid, barren, probably can't even walk on it terrain because it's so slanted. Then balanced with this clear blue water down beneath, visually, but as well as, you know, when you think about going out in nature, you've got the shore that hits the sand at the beach. There's a balance to that. Right. It's okay. I'm going to pull one clarifying card and then I'm going to wrap this up, but just keeping in mind what my question was. Now that we are hitting that intersection where my guides told me before that the power of that darker line and everything that it represented would begin to wane, which we see that it is. Is there anything else that we're waiting on? Or have all of the things been revealed to us? And I would say they've answered this question with a yes, but I am going to pull one more card. Just a clarifying card, a last message card. And maybe I'll pull you down here so you can see me shuffle. Yeah. I'm going to pull this card. Okay, I'm going to pull this one. Connect with the dead is the card. Give me 1 second and I'll pull you back up. Okay, so I'm just going to read the brief description for this card, Connect with the Dead. And it says, look toward the dead, your ancestors or someone you've admired, and see how they have struggled. Your ancestors' personal idols have manifested you, and you have manifested them into your mutual storylines. You now have the opportunity to overcome what they could not. Use that knowing as the fuel you need to take action in whatever area of your life is comparable to where your ancestors or personal idols have struggled. Now, this is layers steep. As I was reading that, I saw the spiral go around, and we can put this in the context of history in terms of different wars that have happened and what our ancestors may have had to go through. We can put this in the context of many things here in the United States, the Civil Rights Movement, before that, during the Industrial Revolution and what people were going through. We can also expand that into the other realms and think about what this card is saying, connect to the dead, right? We were talking about the different dimensions and how we are having more access to them right now and will be continuing to have that access moving in the into the future here. And so thinking beyond our ancestors in terms of who literally lived in a physical flesh mode as we are in now in this 3D. And what ancestors do we have that may have existed in other places, right? On other planets, in other totally different cosmologies, galaxies. Are they a part of the star system in any way, such as a star seed? Are they a part of the angelic realm? Did they come from Irish or Scottish heritage? Were they fairies, right? So let's just zoom out and consider all of the types of ancestors that we may have, we may be connected to, that we may have been born from, right? And where we might have been, I'll say, even before we incarnated here. Now, there's tons of beliefs, and I won't say my truth is the only truth out there. Of course, it's not, right? And I've seen many stories circulating about how we only incarnate into Earth one time. Who the hell really knows, right? We're not going to know if that's true until we get back to where we originated from, where all the answers are there, where the knowing is. Now we can do what we can in terms of our connections here. We can visit the Akashic records and see. We can chat with our guides and the different federations and consciousnesses, right? We can talk to the angels to understand as much as we can. And that's going to get clear. The messages will get clearer and clearer as we move into the future here. But someone described it the other day as moving into this tunnel, right? Well, we might lose some people. We have already been losing some people along the way. And so everyone may not, at least initially, be privy to the information that we are for those who have been paying attention. But that's where you lead by example. That's where you connect in and channel. That's where you begin to create your revised myths and archetypes, right? The stories that we'll need moving forward. And with this card, I will also say it's reminding me to not forget what is dying that we are walking from, right? So we don't end up back in that place of solitude, too comfortable, too unquestioning about what's going on around us, right? So as we move into the future where it looks a little brighter, where it feels more aligned, where we are asking for the things that we actually need and expecting them to show up in ways that they haven't been showing up for us as a nation and as humanity here on this earth. Do not forget what we just came through. Do not forget that the entire structure of our existence was based on all of that gunky, ugly, dark, heavy stuff running in the background. It was a part of the code, right, of the matrix. And so this card tells me there will be many, many times when we cycle back around in certain areas, certain aspects of what that matrix once was, and it's going to be asking us to evolve it. And so we can't forget what was there initially, right? And that will be the place where we start in terms of changing it. So connect with the dead. You know, somebody told me yesterday in a reading, and I love the work that I do. I love readings that I give to people because I also learn, right? And I'm also reminded of things during that time when I'm tapped in and tuned in and channeling for them. And she said, you know, if we can find one good thing beneath, and I'm paraphrasing, beneath the rot, then that is what we take with us. And that is what we use to make a different decision. And if this card is not encompassing that, I don't know what is. Look at this. Connect with the dead, and look at it. It's like, who wants to connect with this? It just looks like debris, right? But even that is a message on its own, telling us to look beyond the ways that we think about things, the way that we think about what has died, the way that we think about death, and re-examine it. Because this looks like waste, right? Does it not? But here, it's telling us to connect with what is dead. Because there's wisdom in that. There are lessons in that. There are messages in that. So I love this card, Connect to the Dead. And again, there's multiple ways to talk about death. So I'm going to say here it is, do the shadow work on a more practical and surface level message or way of thinking about things, right? Heal the parts of yourself that are calling you to, that are calling you and wanting to be healed. But it's also saying, remember to expand and remember that you are part of something so much larger, that there were ways of existing before all of the nefarious things came into play that have been controlling this planet. And there will be ways to exist outside of it. And again, like I said in one of the recent videos that I did, a matrix is not inherently bad. It just becomes a container for sustaining something, for holding something, for understanding something. But it's about what threads we use to create that matrix that determines if we live in the light or if we live in the dark. But okay, I will end it here. I've got a follow-up question, so I will be back with another video, but I will see you then. And one last thing, I am hosting a psychic medium development circle, and I'll put a link to it in the description, but it is for those who are already receiving messages, who are ready to refine their channels, whether it is new ways that you are beginning to receive messages, or if this is kind of your first run through in terms of this last year and your gifts have been coming online rapidly, as many people have been experiencing. But it's really important to create a foundation for yourself so you understand how you need to move forward, so you understand where your strengths are and what is asking for your attention, so you are able to interpret with more clarity and precision the messages that you are receiving. So it's not all jumbled up, because some of us are just complete open channels, and that puts us in a vulnerable position sometimes in terms of discernment, in terms of connecting with lower level energies that are wanting to attach themselves to someone and carry out their own agendas, right? Like I was saying with that positioning card. So if you are interested, it is a safe environment where you will receive practice, where you will be able to have your questions, your most pressing development questions answered, and where you will receive channeled insight into your next step in your development as well. So I hope to see you there.